guys, welcome or welcome back. Today's video is going to be about public speaking, so let's just get on into it. A lot of people struggle with anxiety when they have to get up and speak in front of a bunch of people, especially strangers. It's understandable, it's a real daunting prospect, but I've picked up a few tips across the years on how to manage that anxiety. So here they are. Tip number 1, know your stuff. I know it sounds obvious, but often what people will do is they will try to memorize a script. That doesn't work, not unless you've got a great memory, but if you deal with anxiety, then you'll know that often you just kind of forget things. So trying to memorize a script is a lot of work, especially when you then have to go perform that script by yourself in front of a bunch of people. What I started to do was just make sure I understand what I'm talking about. That way you can just kind of wing it at the time. You know, you have the slides behind you, make sure that they're like good prompts for you about what you want to talk about, and then just go for it. Practice it obviously beforehand, but if you know your stuff, you can wing it so you don't have that pressure of trying to memorize something and then you feel anxious and then you can't even remember, or you lose your place, which is the worst thing when trying to memorize a script. If you forget where you are, it's really hard to pick it back up again. So just wing it, but make sure you know your stuff. Tip number 2, practice. That means practicing with like friends and family, or even just by yourself. Just go over it, get used to speaking in front of people, get used to what you're talking about, get used to how long it takes, those sorts of things, because your brain struggles to differentiate between an imagined situation and a real situation. So obviously if you imagine that you are presenting in front of whatever audience you would be presenting in front of, you will be able to slowly gain the confidence that you need to actually manage that anxiety on the day. Of course, on the day, it will be a little bit more intense, but you should be able to do it if you keep practicing beforehand. Tip number 3, give yourself some kind of like anxiety toolkit. That might mean having something in your hands that you can just hold on to, or almost like a grounding kind of method, or whether it's like a water bottle or even a fidget spinner. Give yourself something that you can kind of hold on to during the presentation. When you're up in front of loads of strangers, it can feel really daunting and you just feel that every part of you is judged. And a very common thing is not knowing what to do with your hands. So if you have something that you can hold on to or to just keep your focus on, it just will lessen that anxiety at least a tiny bit. Tip number 4, make sure to take a breath. It's really hard when you're talking in front of people to remember to breathe properly, because part of you just wants to rush to just get the information out and just be done with it as soon as possible. You also don't want to pause for too long because you don't want it to become awkward, but it's really important to just take a breath. So in between slides, every time you make a good point, basically just stop, take a breath, calm yourself down, and then continue. The same way, like breathing exercises, they're great, but they don't really work when you have to present in front of people, because you can't just sit there and focus on breathing in and out slowly. Another tip, look at individual people. A lot of people will say to just kind of look off in the distance and straight on, or like stare at a wall and talk. And that does work for some people, so obviously try that as well. But for me, I found that actually looking at different people as though I'm talking to them makes it a lot less intimidating. When you look straight ahead, all you can see just underneath like where you're looking is just people. They're everywhere and they're faceless, so it just feels more intimidating, and often it looks like there's more people than there are. If you manage to gain eye contact with individual people, it reduces it, because rather than feeling like you're speaking to a lot of people, you feel like you're speaking to one or two. That in itself should reduce the anxiety to a point that you will be able to manage it throughout the speech. Especially if you're in school, it's great if you kind of look at the teacher every so often, or the lecturer, because you are effectively presenting to them. It's their opinion that matters at the end of the day. So that is who your target is. The final tip is to give yourself an out. This is like incredibly difficult if you're not in an educational environment, because what I would suggest if you are in school or at university is to go and speak to your lecturer. Explain to them what you struggle with. Perhaps they can give somebody to come up with you or give you some kind of support, so that if your anxiety is too high, you can just leave. You can end it. There can be like a and that's it, thank you, and you can leave. Some kind of keyword, and your school or university will try to support you more often than not. Obviously, in the professional world, it's a lot harder to do that because you are presenting something. Usually it's either for a seminar or it's for something paid. So it's harder to get out, but you can plan it. And the reason that I say it's good to have that option of getting out quickly is because that in itself should reduce your anxiety. If you feel that you're trapped in a situation, usually your anxiety will just get higher and higher and higher and higher until you can't cope with it and you can end up with like a full-blown anxiety attack. If you know that you have an option to leave, that will often be like, it will just reassure your mind of, no, this is okay. We can leave at any moment, we know how to. The way that I would suggest doing that, if it's in a professional way, is to come up with like a conclusion to what you're trying to say. Summarize your main point of the presentation, say thank you for listening, and just walk away. It might mean that you have to leave like the slide up on the screen. People might be like, well, what happened there? But it is an effective way to get out if you have to. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. Drop any more like advice or tips below. Drop a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to see more content like this, and I'll see you next time.